is a couple weeks ago, I was going through and I was trying to find some information on it, and I found this great article over on Den of Geek, written by a little guy named David Crow, who I ended up bugging on Twitter a little bit, and he agreed to come on to teach us a little bit about the Disney Renaissance. How you doing, David?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh yeah,
Thank you for doing it. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure for sure. So, why don't you go ahead and start off? I think you wanted to start off talking just a little bit about your personal connection to this time period in Disney animation.
All right. Well, thank you again for having me. And I'll say when I first want to just say that I have an unrepentant bias for these movies. I remember the first time that I saw one of these when I was probably about 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
My parents took me to see Aladdin in the theaters. And this was a big deal for me at the time because it was an evening screening. And by evening, I mean it was probably 5 p.m. But and to me, it was a big deal. And I have vague memories still of, standing in the line and watching the film and loving the genie and unwittingly preparing to drive my parents up the walls by demanding we listen to the soundtrack on cassette tape again and again. So if your listeners recall what those are.
Oh yeah,
some of them.
If our listeners don't know, they used to have it was magnetic tape they would store sound on.
It's like an MP3, but it comes on a cassette.
And you have to flip it over halfway through.
Exactly, and to rewind it too.
Rewind, or if the tape comes out, you have to put the pencil in to wind it back.
And we're old.
Yeah, everything was back then. No, but kidding aside though, but yeah. So I come to these films with a sense of nostalgia, but really I and many others of our age group, millennials, Generation Y, whatever it is this week, grew up during a brief period when there was kind of a revolution happening at Disney. We benefited from it because it really only lasted from 1989 to 1999, which it was definitely a confluence of events. I don't think you can really just credit one person or transition for what happened, but I tend to broadly categorize it to 4 major influences.
Mm-hmm.
The advent of relatively strong animation competition in the 1980s, the turnaround brought about by the advent of Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, to the corporate side of the studio and Disney as a whole, as well as the success of one non-Disney movie in particular. And the fourth and final, I would say, really is Howard Ashman. In fact, that last element, you could call that the Broadway element, is what I think defines not only the Disney Renaissance, but I think, the resurgence of musical popularity with our age group in general and the following 20 years. But all right, well, anyway, Disney, to go over those 4 points now. Okay, so Disney was in a bad place in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
Walt died in '66, and in a lot of ways, the company had never fully recovered from that.
Mm-hmm.
They still made films, but there was a growing sense amongst the board of directors that was not even necessary. Whether because the 70s were a particularly lackluster decade for live action and animation at the studio. Mm-hmm. At Walt Disney Animation Studios in particular, there was a generational divide between the young guns coming in, cultivated by Cal Arts, and the quote-unquote 9 old men who were legendary animators going back to Walt. And they were... they've been set in their ways for 30, 40 years at this point.
Right.
Yeah. So in this era, the Walt Disney Animation Studios fairy tale was 20 to 30 years ago as it went on, because the last one was Sleeping Beauty in '59. The last fully fledged musical was The Jungle Book in 1967.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time the 70s were rolling around, we have films that you and I might, or your listeners might still remember with a sense of nostalgia, the Robin Hood film with foxes or the Rescuers.
Oh, yeah.
But they were not what I would call the crown jewels of the studio, and they didn't see them that way either.
Oh no,
So,
like if there's a shelf of Disney movies, they put those movies back behind the other movies.
They're the second row.
yeah, when they release them on Blu-ray, those are the ones that don't give any special features.
No features to be had.
Yeah. But one of the most charismatic animators during this time was Don Bluth, who on September 13th, 1979, made himself a birthday present by resigning from Walt Disney Animation Studios, taking half the animators with him. And I'm not going to criticize Bluth because the studio was in a really bad shape at the time. And, he went on and made The Secret of Nim, and he, made a business deal with Steven Spielberg, who was kind of a Walt Disney type in the 1980s too. So at Amblin, they partnered on An American Tail and The Land Before Time.
Such good movies.
Yeah, both classics.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're both really good movies, and they were really embarrassing Disney because around the same time, Disney was making something called The Black Cauldron.
Yeah.
So a little bit before that, before The Black Cauldron came out, in '84, Saul Steinberg, who was a board member, attempted a failed hostile takeover of Disney.
Oh no.
Split up the media empire because he thought it was, Roy E. Disney claims he thought it was a museum piece. So speaking of Roy E. Disney, who was the nephew of Walt Disney, he resigned the board for the second time in a form of corporate brinksmanship, and used that to bring in Frank Wells from Warner Brothers and made him president of the Walt Disney Company, as well as CEO. And
do you know if his background at Warner Brothers, like what did he work on over there?
I actually am not as aware of what he was working on at Warner Brothers as what brought CEO. Who he recommended to Disney and who eventually came over was Michael Eisner, who became CEO of Disney. And he came from Paramount, and he came with his films over there. He worked on Beverly Hills Cop. I remember that. And he had several. I'm drawing a blank right now, but he had several other hits at Paramount under his belt, and he was overseeing the film division, and he had done ABC television before that.
Yeah.
When Eisner came over from Paramount, he brought a wonderkin with him. He brought Jeffrey Katzenberg to oversee the Walt Disney Studios as chairman. Mm-hmm. And really, these three men are really credited with the corporate turnaround of Disney from the top to the bottom, and this includes Walt Disney Animation Studios. And I have to give them credit because, I mean, when you look at what Disney was making before they came on, which was, again, The Black Cauldron in '85, which is an awful movie, really. It's not the Lloyd Alexander book, or 2 out of 5 of them into an 80-minute film. And
yeah, I know I've never made it all the way through. Like I've tried to watch it like 3 or 4 times. I made it like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I can never quite make it all the way to the end.
But I mean, I remember trying to watch it after Lord of the Rings came out, and it wasn't something of the same ilk.
Mm-hmm.
No.
But anyway, so Katzenberg does deserve some credit for the revolution. He made a very, very competitive, I would say, very corporate, very Gordon Gekko style environment at Disney, but around the same time, we have Touchstone Pictures, which was releasing Splash with Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah, and he had several other hits around this period. And I mean, this is when Disney came back, but at the same time, Disney likes to romanticize, or Katzenberg at least likes to romanticize this. But I mean, at the same time, he gathered all their animators around for like a 6 a.m. meeting once and says, I'm not interested in the Academy Awards. I'm interested in the Bank of America Awards. So he and Eisner also moved the animation studio staff out of the building and to a decrepit, rundown facility in Glendale. And I mean, really, Disney's animation looked like it was on its way out in the 80s. I mean, Michael Eisner told Diane Sawyer in a 1988 interview that they only make animated movies now because it's part of their studio's legacy. It's out of a sense of obligation.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that brings me to the third influence, which was Steven Spielberg.
Mm-hmm.
So Steven Spielberg had a falling out with Don Bluth, as apparently a lot of people do. But again, Bluth's next movie, I actually have a lot of fondness for. All Dogs Go to Heaven. But
Yes.
Spielberg went on and ended up making Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the classic Robert Zemeckis film, and I mean, it's a combination of Disney grandeur and Warner Brothers irreverence, and it's a neo-noir because even kids' movies were that for the boomer generation.
Yeah, and I remember when I was a kid, the most impressive thing about that movie was all the characters were in the same movie.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like mind-blowing that Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny were in the same movie.
They were all there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, I remember, being terrified of Christopher Lloyd's character and how he would put people in poisonous vats of chemicals or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah, and then he takes off the glasses and has the big cartoon.
Oh, the eyes. Oh.
I mean, it's a wonderful film, but, it wasn't actually animated at WB or Disney. It was, at least on Disney's part, they didn't have the facilities or the animators. It was outsourced to a Canadian animator, Richard Williams, who supervised it at an independent studio in London. And, executives from Disney and Warner Brothers were flying out. But the point is, it was a huge hit. It made $320 million at the box office. And it won 3 Oscars. It was nominated for more. And all of a sudden, animation was something, again, that parents could go to as well as and enjoyed as much as their children. It was no longer a placeholder entertainment to a lot of people. And before this movie even came out, Disney saw the appeal in that, and they actually brought in many of the animators from London to Walt Disney Animation Studios, which finally brings us to the Renaissance, which began with The Little Mermaid.
Woohoo!
Little movie, you might have heard of it.
Little movie, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it was animators turned directors, Ron Clements and John Musker, who also did The Great Mouse Detective beforehand, which kind of doesn't make the cut when film historians talk about this. But
It was a good movie, though. I remember liking that movie.
I remember liking it as a kid, and it's still very entertaining. I think it works better for children than it doesn't really have the multi-layer appeal. But
Maybe they should remake it with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Remake everything with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Would it be better than Robert Downey Jr.?
Likely. Very, very likely.
But one of the reasons I think the big missing ingredient besides better animation and more animators, more respect from the studio, which also saw Oliver and company make a lot of money. But what the crux of it, I really have to say, is Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, who did the songs. Ashman did the lyrics, and Menken did the music. But Menken also scored it. But they literally came from Broadway. I mean, Ashman grew up loving musicals, Disney musicals. He always talked in to the press, especially about Peter Pan being his favorite growing up. And in this period, he had just had an off-Broadway success with Menken called Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh yeah, I'm mildly familiar with that movie.
You're mildly obsessed with
I might
that
have
movie.
watched the movie version of that like 80 times when I was 18, possibly. I used to watch it every night because it's the only tape I had in the house.
I mean, the movie is terrific. The movie, again, because musicals weren't popular back then, was a flop, but it was a huge hit off Broadway. And after that, he did a Broadway show called Smile, which, by the way, starred an ingenue, or featured an ingenue, and it played by Jodie Benson.
Oh.
And Smile crashed and burned in '86 on Broadway. So he was basically coming to Disney to reinvent himself, and he always talked very openly about how he saw there being a stronger connection between animation and musical theater. Both are very artificial. you're witnessing an illusion, and hopefully you're just going along with it for the entertainment, for the
Right.
magic. Live action film generally attempts to hide the illusion, the artifice of it, which is why, in Ashman's opinion, why movie musicals were not in a good place then. But anyway, so they collaborated. They collaborated on this, and I say Ashman wrote the lyrics, but he had a very strong effect over the entire creative blood of Little Mermaid. It was his decision to turn Sebastian from an English serving crab into a Jamaican Rastafarian. It was he also reconfigured the entire story to fit the musical formula, the traditional one, going back to at least Lerner and Lowe, I would say. But basically, he introduced that concept of an I Want song. While there have been singing in Disney movies since Snow White, often the older musical formula had the story stop, and then there would be a charming placeholder, a song, and something to entertain the family. With Mermaid, the singing became crucial and to narrative development and character development. So enter Part of Your World, which is an I Want song, because you have your lead ingenue. She's first you introduce the chorus girls, her sisters in this, and they sing, and they're very boring. They just sing a funny song. But then then comes the leading lady, and she sits down and sings about what she wants, what she dreams about, and in this case, it's a pair of legs. And the audience, wants her to get it. I mean, it goes back to My Fair Lady or Brigadoon, and Ashman also. This really set the standard for what became the Renaissance formula, and he brought in Broadway talent like Jodie Benson to sing the role. And the story is that her voice was so beautiful during Part of Your World that animator Glenn King he insisted he had to create Ariel, and he had to animate that song, even though he had never really drawn female characters before. And he used I thought I had. He used for inspiration, I know, Alyssa Milano, and I want to say Sherry.
Oh, I could see that now.
And Sherry Stoner did some of the physicality for the role, a lot of it. But anyway, again, this is why you can't really give it all to Katzenberg for being a tyrant, a successful tyrant. The studio, because he wanted to cut the song. It didn't work at a test screening with unfinished animation, and he thought it was boring. And Ashman stopped him. And that is the emotional core of the film. And you also have Under the Sea and Kiss the Girl, which would not have existed if you didn't turn Sebastian into a Jamaican crab.
Oh yeah, and right there, that's like the three songs everybody, if you like Little Mermaid songs, those are the three right there.
Yeah. I mean, actually, the movie itself, I mean, I remember because my older sister liked it, I refused to like it. And then then I saw it again many years later. I'm like, this is delightful. Why did I deny it? But
I went to see it in the theater when it came out. I think it was like maybe the second or third movie I'd ever gone to see after Top Gun and Karate Kid. And I didn't realize that it was supposed to be, or I didn't think of it as like, oh, I'm going to see a girls movie. I was like, oh, they're finally releasing like a
cartoon,
a big Disney animated movie, and I'm going to get to go see it in the theater.
I don't think 6-year-old Bill said big Disney animated movie. I think you were like, cartoon.
I said, I want to go see this movie indubitably, because that's how I talked when I was 6 years old.
It's still how you talk.
But I mean, that is really where the formula began. I mean, they had one other movie that gets grandfathered into the Renaissance called The Rescuers Down Under. It had beautiful animation, and it's the only sequel Walt Disney Animation Studios has ever made. All the less fondly remembered sequels were not made at the studio.
Like the rest of the Little Mermaids, Little Mermaid 2, 3, I believe there was up to like 4 or something.
Yeah, and to the credit of the studio too.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But after Little Mermaid, the formula was written, and that pretty much defined the Renaissance from that point on, including what at least the studio, I'm fairly certain, or the people who worked on these movies considers the crowning achievement, which is Beauty and the Beast. And
Tale as old as time.
Song as old as rhyme.
I mean, I don't know if how you're editing this, but I can keep going at this. At the Renaissance, we've reached the point where we're in the Renaissance now. So.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess we can probably just start talking about the individual movies then.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see here. Well, first of all, like, hold on. I'm trying to think of a good question. You blindsided me. No. Can you tell us a little bit about how Beauty and the Beast was put together? As a package and everything, because I know it kind of you mentioned in the article it contrasts a little bit with the way that Ariel was set up in Little Mermaid as far as how they presented the ingenue.
Yeah, certainly. Well, in the Little Mermaid, it was considered very proactive when it came out. You can watch Roger Ebert, enthusiastically talk about how progressive it was, and compared to Snow White singing "Someday Her Prince Will Come," a man she's never even met. Yeah, it's very progressive. She goes after what she wants, and what she wants is a pair of legs. So she can meet a man, and it doesn't really withstand serious feminism or scrutiny or really any sort of academic scrutiny. So. They did try and course correct this because they then eventually made Beauty and the Beast. One of the intentions with that film was for the ingenue Belle to be have an intellectual curiosity, to be independent. Her goal is not to meet a man; it's to have adventure, to live a full life, to not just marry the dreamy schmuck down the street. So it was, and that's why I think Belle's considered still one of their strongest characters, because there was a reaction to criticism to The Little Mermaid, which I think is somewhat, I think it's there, but I don't think it's as damning as some may say about that film.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously this is a few decades back in the past too.
Right.
So, attitudes have changed since then for sure. So we get through, Beauty and the Beast comes out, another great book, great songs
Amazing.
in it, that does great in the box office.
That's great on the Broadway.
Great with CGI and everything. And the next movie that comes in is Aladdin. And you talk a little bit in the article about how it was the first movie in the Renaissance period that was really based around a personality. Robin Williams, you want to talk a little on that?
Okay. Yes, actually. Okay. Well, Aladdin, I'm not sure. I don't know offhand if it was originally Howard Ashman's idea, but Ashman really pursued Aladdin. That was what he wanted to do next because, and I am about to answer your question. He insisted that he did Beauty and the Beast because it was originally not going to be a musical, and it had a different director attached. And after seeing 20 minutes of it, Katzenberg decided it was not what Disney wanted to do. It got scrapped, and Gary Truesdale and Kirk Wise came aboard to direct it. And and I do think they made a fantastic film. It's still the only animated film that was nominated for Best Picture when there were only 5 categories. And a big part of that was the music. And the reason I bring this up is because Ashman actually didn't live to see it. He died of AIDS before it was released. And the reason I bring that, so the movie though and I do think that was a big blow to Disney and this entire movement in its infancy. But
oh yeah, because he was kind of spearheading the whole kind of spirit of it, with the music.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's very tragic, and it's interesting because when Beauty and the Beast had its premiere, you have Roy E. Disney and Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner all giving speeches and taking credit for who's most responsible for it, essentially. But in any event, so that led to Aladdin, which was the one that Ashman did want to make next. And some of the songs were already finished for it by the time it came out. Like I believe he wrote. Actually, I think I have this written down. He wrote Arabian Nights and Friend Like Me and Prince Ali, but one jump ahead in a whole new world. The big ones were Tim Rice. But the reason that I think the movie works so well is because, as you said, it is about the genie. That's what I responded to as a kid. I loved Robin Williams as the genie because, speaking of another, great talent, a genius, was Robin Williams, who was a terrific. I mean, at this point, he had proven he can do comedy, he can do drama, but what he was never able to bring into a film was his comedic sensibility to the full. If you've ever watched Robin Williams do stand-up, for one thing, don't let children watch that.
Yeah.
don't let like anyone under. I'm not going to say, but definitely
no one under 18.
No one in the single digit should watch a stand-up, but it's brilliant. And no film could keep up with it before Aladdin. And really, the animators, he did not really follow a whole script necessarily. They had to keep up with him and his impressions, and it's such an amazing performance that it really defined the movie. And I would even say it kind of laid the groundwork for DreamWorks, because when Katzenberg did leave later on in the Renaissance, when he left, he founded DreamWorks with Spielberg and David Geffen. And at DreamWorks Animation, they tried a few Disney-esque films, but eventually he made Shrek, which is basically the whole idea of Robin Williams' genie being turned into an entire film. And that, at least that's my opinion, and that's kind of the tone of every DreamWorks animated film ever since.
Oh yeah, I can definitely see that comparison. You kind of walked it through as far as the progression too. Like I always thought it was really interesting with the genie though, that all of the comedy in it was so improv-y. Well, at the same time, the medium,
is not improv-y.
Disney animated movies is like the opposite of improv-y. This is where they, they'll send a team into a building for 4 or 5 years, throw out 90% of the work they do just to get that hour and a half movie, Right. So just like the complete opposite of improv.
Yeah, I mean, it is a credit. Well, I mean, Robin Williams was not even only wanted to do this as kind of a gag, or that's not fair. He thought it was a fun thing to do, but he didn't want his name on the posters, and he didn't want it to draw a lot of attention to himself. And then, of course, Genie is the poster, and apparently that caused a falling out between him and Katzenberg for a little while.
Yeah, he didn't come back. I think it was like the first sequel he didn't come back for something, right? Because of the whole hurt feelings over that and everything.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, in retrospect, he probably shouldn't have come back for the third sequel either, but he did. So Katzenberg was gone at that point, if that says anything.
Okay, so let's see here. So I guess that brings us up to The Lion King, right?
The Lion King.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yes, The Lion King. I'll say this: Lion King was developed concurrently with Pocahontas, and I actually think that this is a little bit of this kind of. This is both, in my opinion, this is the best. I would go ahead and say it's my favorite Disney film anyway, animated. But it's where really everything kind of fell apart as well.
I believe it.
A lot changed at Disney behind the scenes by the time The Lion King was released in '94, and for that matter, Pocahontas in '95. The most tragic of these was another death, Frank Wells, who was kind of. When I talk about the corporate figures, people don't talk about Frank Wells as much because, from all accounts, he was a really charming man. He was the super ego to just the plain egos of Eisner and Katzenberg and Roy E. Disney. And so when he died in a helicopter crash in '94. He was actually skiing with Clint Eastwood, and they took different helicopters down. And
oh wow.
Wells has died, or crashed and he died.
Oh wow!
by all accounts, it hit Michael Eisner really hard because he was a friend, and Wells did most of the administrative work, and that allowed Eisner to be a little less hands off. And he never did find a good replacement for Wells. He became much more of a micromanager. But in the and that will play a role later. But in the immediate future, what happened was Katzenberg, shortly after Wells's death, requested the job. He wanted to be CEO. He wanted to be president of Disney, and Eisner told him no. He and Roy E. Disney, I would say unfairly, never warmed to Katzenberg because, despite whatever people say about him behind closed doors, he was very successful. He has been successful at what he does, but they didn't offer it to him, so he left, and that's when he did. He left right after Lion King became, the biggest animated film of all time up to that point. But here's where I think you can stop short of saying that this is also why the Renaissance was in decline afterwards, because Katzenberg was also the one who gathered all the animators around I want to say, I'm not sure what year it was, but he gathered them all around and he gave a big speech about how Pocahontas he called it West Side Story. It's a home run. It's a slam dunk. The Lion King was this weird little experiment. As a result, they were allowed to experiment with the Lion King. I think that's why it's so good. You have this really menacing score by Hans Zimmer. It started from the idea, I believe, of Cain and Abel, but it became much more Hamlet. It's Hamlet with lions. But the brilliance, in my opinion, of the Lion King is it's not actually. They didn't try and they did not give us the Disney version of Hamlet. They just, they realized that it's Hamlet with lions. So you can pick and choose. You can have the uncle kill the father and the son go to ground and be forced by his father's ghost to seek vengeance. But you don't have to change the ending to them. They all had Hamlet and Ophelia had a happy love song. You don't have to play to the formula, and Lion King really didn't play to the formula, and I think it's terrific. And then
and it probably the darkest the darkest movie out of this period. Classic Disney animation was a lot darker than the Renaissance period. Like you go and look at the Maleficent scene in Sleeping Beauty, for example, sections of Fantasia, things like that. Super, super dark. There are like demons and devils and, fire and everything like that. And it was nice to see Disney kind of get back to that a little bit with The Lion King.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Mufasa for when I was a kid was, the way people talk about Bambi's death or I would say Old Yeller, but I was really sad at Old Yeller. Mufasa was part of, traumatizing children.
Yes, it really was. Well, it was just watching all the animals come down and just like stomp all over them.
Killing cute animals to traumatize children. It's the Disney way, right? So.
It is the Disney way. It's part of the formula.
And parents, they got two birds with one stone.
Yes. No one gets two parents.
But no, not yet. Maybe. Well, Frozen.
Yeah, but they both died.
They got both of them.
Let me ask you this real quick, and you didn't address this in the article really at all. I was just kind of curious. Do you know much about the controversy with the Kimba the White Lion, the Japanese animated film that had a similar plot to The Lion King that some people have said maybe Disney might have ripped them off or something? I'm showing a screenshot to our video audience, but...
I think it's quite possible. Honestly, I know you have Kimba, which, to be fair, Simba is,
Kimba, yeah.
I believe Swahili for lion. Don't quote me on that if it's wrong. But, yes, Kimba, you have the story of a lion and parents, and he's standing on a tall rock. I don't know. I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure animators at Disney Walt Disney Animation Studios were aware of this film, but I can't comment how much of an influence it was.
Yeah.
That's fair. And yeah, I figured if nothing else, I'd bring it up just in case our audience wasn't aware of the controversy. Because I actually,
You mean like me?
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about, this lion?
But when I heard about this, I went back and I watched some of the original, the Kimba cartoons. Pretty good. So if you like The Lion King, see where it started, maybe if they would admit
maybe,
it.
who knows?
If Disney would admit it.
No.
But watch that and then watch Hamlet, not the Mel Gibson.
Should recast that with Benedict Cumberbatch too.
Stop recasting everything with Benedict Cumberbatch. Oh, Pocahontas.
Yeah. So it is as high as the Lion King flew. Pocahontas. Maybe didn't do so well.
No.
So what do you think Pocahontas really made Pocahontas miss the mark?
Well, I'll first give it a compliment. I think the animation is beautiful, and I think Alan Menken's songs and his score, again, very beautiful, not nearly as sinister as The Lion King.
They definitely, trivia, they actually used all of the colors of the wind.
Stop it.
In the movie.
But that's where really my compliments from that film have to come to an end. I think a big problem with Pocahontas was that well, again, to compare it to The Lion King, you can adapt Shakespeare without it actually being Shakespeare. Conversely, with Pocahontas, you're adapting actual history. And I understand creative license. In fact, I usually am a big supporter of it. But there's just something uncomfortable about how they've dumbed down the Native Americans into these noble savages who... on top of you have, the English in this are for some reason searching for gold in coastal Virginia. It's from North Carolina. That seemed even stupid to me as a kid. But on top of that, yes, the Native Americans in that film on their apparent coastal mountains can talk to bears and talk to trees, and the trees can talk back, and they're magical, and they can let the white man understand white guilt, and it's not a good movie in any sense, really.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and again, The Lion King didn't really follow the Broadway formula, or at least not in the traditional mid-20th century sense, and Pocahontas did, and again, trying to force the Little Mermaid, spoiler alert, in the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, she dies. She commits suicide to save the prince. I think you can get away better with changing that ending than implying Pocahontas and John Smith had imply that they will be reunited with a happily ever after when he actually left her to fend for herself, abandoned by her own people, and he had his men lie to her and say that he was dead. This was not a nice guy.
Yeah, and she was 14.
Yeah,
and she was a child.
And her raccoon pal wasn't very funny. He was actually kind of just dour and rude.
I remember the first time I saw this, which would possibly be the only time I saw this, was at the drive-in, and I fell asleep. I was a child who fell asleep to an animated movie. Inappropriate.
Inappropriate.
I mean, yeah, I would agree. And I also agree with the sidekicks where, the crab in Little Mermaid is delightful, and you have Lumiere, voiced by Jerry Orbach, in Beauty and the Beast, who's, a scene stealer, and even Abu in Aladdin. By the time you reach this, it feels played out. And they have two sidekicks. I believe there was a pug in there as well, and the sidekicks had their own subplot, and I just don't think it worked really on almost any level. Yeah.
Probably the most forgettable entry out of these movies for sure. Well, actually, I can't even say that because I've never even seen the next one.
I don't think I've seen any of the rest of them.
But yeah, I guess that brings us into it. And this is another situation where you felt like it was a bit of an inappropriate adaptation, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, if depending on if you like football or not, I guess.
Uh, well, yes, I'd agree with that. I mean, again, this was going to be their next, and I'm sure the studio logic was this is our next Beauty and the Beast. Truesdale and Wise were back as the directors. The music was actually quite ominous and operatic, and music again is terrific. Alan Menken once more. But I mean, it suffers again. Lumiere and I forget the name of the clock. All the characters.
Cogsworth.
Yes, but they're very charming creations, and they add to the story. At least, assuming you like Disney's style. But Hunchback of Notre Dame, you have talking gargoyles, as Quasimodo's friends, and this is a character who is, while tragically sympathetic, beautifully sympathetic, he's also somewhat creepy, and even to the reader, he's somewhat standoffish. You're not sure. He does murder people in the book, and for him to be palling around with gargoyles, and again, spoiler alert: Victor Hugo, all his books, at the end of the day, are about suffering, really, and. I'm going to just say Quasimodo dies at the end of the book while practicing a form of, I don't know if you want to call it necrophilia, but he was holding on to Esmeralda's body and lets himself be buried alive with her corpse. That's the end of the book.
Cheery.
So,
Lovely.
So changing it to the Disney formula. Again, I think Little Mermaid works with the change, Beauty and the Beast works, but to jump ahead a little bit, again, why Lion King I thought worked was it took familiar elements and made something very Disney, but something original with it. And around the same time this movie's coming out, Pixar is preparing its second film, and most Pixar films, I would say, take familiar elements and they reinvent them in a way only animation can. Toy Story is a buddy comedy. Incredibles is a family dramedy. WALL-E is a musical in itself, even though there's no singing, and a romance. I think that proves to be I think that proved to be a more successful way of animating stories than just adapting classic works of literature or history.
Definitely. Okay, so let's see here. So we get through Hunchback. We have then Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan are the last three. So and this is when the Disney Renaissance period is sort of winding down a little bit. So do you have any insight as to kind of how all that went down? Kind of like the end of the
end of an
glory
era.
days? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will say Michael Eisner, who, again, he brought in a resurgence. Disney was, you had Saul Steinberg trying to break up Disney, and now he brought it back. But by this point, he never really found a good replacement to be president of Disney. He had Michael Ovitz, there for several years, and it was not a happy fit, and he was gone within 2 years. And then he had Bob Iger, who you should know the name probably because he's the current Disney CEO, as president. And I actually enjoy Mulan a lot. Not to get just on the corporate side of things. I think Mulan's a wonderful little movie. If you guys have seen it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's right. I have seen Mulan.
Yeah.
But that was for Once Upon a Time. I was like, wait, I need to see it.
I think I guess Frozen's changed this, but I would used to say it's the only Disney animated film that can withstand feminist scrutiny and still not be found offensive on some level. But no, Mulan, which was not even animated by Walt Disney Animation Studios in Burbank. By this point, they were back on the studio lot. It was actually animated in Orlando.
Oh, nice.
At a satellite facility that's now closed. And I think that's great. But I think it was just a misunderstanding of what was going on in the industry at that time, because Tarzan I don't think was very good. That's I really hate Phil Collins. So.
Yeah, I didn't like the movie. I really like the Tarzan levels of Kingdom Hearts, but that's about it.
But I think it was a misconception about what was going on. Michael Eisner became increasingly micromanaging these films, and he really, unfortunately for him, decided that he really hated Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs was the chairman of Pixar. Pixar was he looked at the success of Pixar. He looked at the success of DreamWorks Animation, and his reaction was, musicals are out, hand-drawn animation is out, and all needs to be CGI. The last hand-drawn film, this is skipping ahead, this is in the Renaissance. It was Home on the Range. I've never actually seen it.
Home on the Range?
I don't think I've ever made it through a trailer for Home on the Range, because its main characters are cows, right? If I remember correctly.
Oh, I don't even remember that one.
Here, Anne-Marie, just for your benefit.
For my benefit, pull that
I'll
up.
punch up Home on the Range.
I've seen the trailer.
All I can do is home on the range.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull this up for you real quick so you can, yeah, this is it. Right here, Home on the Range.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I remember that now. I didn't see it.
Not a great film.
So during this period, Disney was making, before that they made Atlantis and Treasure.
I saw Atlantis.
And those aren't considered part of the Renaissance because they're not really musicals, but I still see the same downward slope you've been seeing since Pocahontas. And eventually you have Brother Bear. And anyway, during the same time, Pixar is creating Monsters, Inc. and Finding Nemo, which unfortunately for Michael Eisner, an email leaked to the board where he thought Finding Nemo was going to be terrible and not make any money, or not make a lot of money.
Well, he was wrong.
It made more money than The Lion King. Whoops. But so by this point, he and Jobs have gone ballistic on it. Jobs described Michael Eisner as a very dark man. So that's, Jobs was not exactly what I would call, if you're being charitable, you would call Steve Jobs very mercurial. So for him to criticize Hughes. So anyway, by 2004, 2005, I'd say the most damning thing was, well, first off, he forced Roy E. Disney off the board for the third time, and that never goes well for whoever does it. And Bob Iger flew down to Disneyland Hong Kong with Eisner. And while they were there, Bob Iger made a mental note he kept to himself that all the characters and the parades that people were loving that were created in the last 10 years, they were all from Pixar movies. Not a single one of them came from Walt Disney Animation. And, the whole Disney formula, you have a big animated film, then you have the theme park rides, the cartoon shows on the Disney, the cereal, the toys, the video games. It's it can be either a wonderful or a terrible machine, however you look at it. But the point is, it was only coming from Pixar in this period for 10 years between 1995 and 2005. Nothing was coming, or most of it was not coming from Walt Disney Animation Studios. And as a result, the Disney board finally pushed Eisner out. And Bob Iger's first priority was to smooth things over with Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs was threatening to take Pixar away from Disney after their contract was over. He bought Pixar, and Jobs ends up with 7% of the stock of Disney, which made him majority shareholder. That brings us pretty close to the modern period at that point. And I will say you see a turnaround because John Lasseter and Ed Catmull of Pixar come in as creative agents overseeing all of Disney Animation, including Pixar and Disney Animation Studios. Start seeing a resurgence in this period with Tangled and on forward to Frozen.
Frozen, I've heard of that.
Frozen? What?
Somewhere from somewhere.
Do you
Like
want to build a snowman?
something like no, but yeah, and I definitely think well, first with Tangled, which honestly I still haven't seen.
How have you not
I
seen
know, right?
Tangled?
But
The child watches it all the time.
but then obviously with Frozen, I kind of feel, and you kind of addressed this when you updated the article. I think it kind of feels almost like we're moving into a new Renaissance, or I guess the Disney Industrial Age or something like
The
that.
Disney feminist era. We have Tangled, and then you had Brave,
Yeah.
which was big until Frozen hit.
Yeah, I mean, I reviewed Frozen for Den of Geek, and I remember coming out of this thinking, oh, this is a wonderful little movie. Adults need to know about it. How are they ever going to know there's this great movie? This will play just as well for them as to children, and it's like the Disney Renaissance. A year later, I feel so bad for parents right now.
As you should.
Yes.
As you should.
I think most parents in this country have officially OD'd on Disney.
Oh, yeah.
From-
Absolutely
on
OD'd on
Frozen.
it.
Okay.
But guess what? Disney's already got the next hit coming, the next fix with the Frozen Fever in front of Cinderella. So
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. It's
Yeah, that's
only
coming up soon, right?
the 13th, I believe.
yeah, it's only a short, but there's one song, so there will be less variety playing in
In the car.
all year round now.
And sadly, that one song is a techno remix of "Let It Go." Okay, David.
It's electronic. To let it go.
But David, we want to thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming
Really
and
appreciate it.
teaching us about the Disney Renaissance period. Where can people find you online? Where should people stalk you online?
Well, I'm associate editor at denofgeek.us, so I manage most of our film content. I write a lot of reviews and overly opinionated essays and features there. And I also am on Twitter at D Crow's Nest, the letter D, Crow's Nest, all one word.
Excellent. And I love the stuff you guys do over there on Den of Geek. I've been a reader for quite a while, and it was nice to finally get to talk to someone from over there.
Do not adjust your computer screen. It's your mind we're changing. Stories set to a theme. Think outside. Universe Box.